All right, we can get started. Welcome, everyone, to the GovLab's Demos for Democracy. We're an ongoing series of live interactive online demonstrations of the latest innovative governance platforms, tools, or methods. Today's our relaunch of the program, actually, after a brief hiatus. My name is Basilio Valdehuesa. I'm Program Administrator at the GovLab. For our relaunch inaugural session, we are featuring Remesh, an online public platform that offers communities, groups, and even nations of people the ability to speak with one voice. Here today are the founders of Remesh, our guest speakers, Andrew Konya and Aaron Slodov. Andrew is a PhD student in computational and theoretical physics with experience developing and implementing mathematical models for natural and man-made systems. Andrew's goal is the completion of a conversation platform built on the framework we're presenting today that can make conversations between countries in conflict a viable alternative to war. Aaron, formerly an engineer at both Google and Meetup.com, is a PhD student in power systems engineering. By enabling Remesh technology, Aaron hopes to bring paradigm-shifting change to the way we communicate and interact with our world. But before we continue, I want to remind everyone that we at the GovLab see Demos for Democracy as a conversation. Everyone is welcome, and we encourage you all to ask questions, discuss use cases, and be a part of the dialogue. First and foremost, we would like Demos for Democracy to help jumpstart a conversation on what works and what doesn't, and to provide developers an interested audience to help refine and improve their tools and platforms. Andrew and Aaron will get a chance to present Remesh to us, but throughout, please do send your questions that come to mind to the Google Hangout on Air Q&A sidebar. As you can see it's enabled on the side here, and we can field those as appropriate. For those of you not logged into the Hangout and who are watching the live feed, send your questions to Twitter with the hashtag #DemocracyDemos, all one word. We'll do our best to engage everyone as best we can, given our time. But finally, before I hand it off to our speakers, just a quick housekeeping note. For those of us logged directly into the Google Hangout on Air, while the speakers present Remesh, please mute your microphones or keep anything that might make noise away from the mic. Without further ado, I'd like to hand it off to Aaron and Andrew. Let us know, what is Remesh?
I guess should I begin with where Remesh started and give that as context for where this at? So Remesh started in 2012 when Israel and Palestine were they were in conflict, as they sometimes are, and I had Palestinian and Israeli friends who were frustrated at the fact that they didn't want the conflict going the way it was, but that the people they talked to and those around them didn't want that, but that it wasn't their decision, that the people didn't get the opportunity to negotiate a ceasefire, that this was in the power or in the hands of the people in charge. So they posed the question, well, what if we as Israel or we as Palestine could we could speak for ourselves, that we could have our own voice with which we could negotiate our own terms of a ceasefire. And so this got me thinking, and so I, for the next year, worked on a mathematical model to describe collective speech, which is to say, just as we have thoughts in our brain and those thoughts come out in words that we say or texts that we type, that could we do that for a group of people? Could we figure out all the thoughts that exist for a group of people and then figure out a way to make those thoughts speak, to turn them into one thing that would speak? And so as that idea kind of evolved and morphed, we decided that we could port that idea into a chat platform, because this is how we as people in the 21st century seem to communicate with each other and our friends and our workers and our colleagues and I guess even our enemies sometimes. And so the idea of chat is that it gives us this open two-way communication where both sides are equal, both sides have something they can speak and the others listen, and through this we can accomplish all these things. And so what Remesh is a chat platform, just like any other, like WhatsApp or any of these other chat platforms, except there's one really crucial difference, and that crucial difference is you can talk to a group of people just as if they were a single person. And so you could say something to, say, America, and what you would get back as a response from America would be just one response, but that one response would represent the collective thoughts of all those who are part of America. And so that is, I guess, the basic idea of what Remesh is.
That sounds great. I mean, I would love to see exactly what this looks like. I mean, but, you know, Aaron, Do you have any thoughts as to why you got involved?
So I went to undergrad with Andrew, and we're both very idealistic thinkers, I think. And when I first learned about this idea, it was just incredibly apparent what kind of potential it could have. And for me, I think the drive is to be doing something useful and interesting, and this has really just like a lot of potential to do that. And as we continue to develop the platform, we're going to see how it changes and how people use it, and it's going to be just an exciting process in general. So I'm ready and I'm waiting, and I can't wait to see what we can do with this.
How long have you guys been working on this?
I've been working on it for about 2 years now. And Aaron, how long have you been?
Probably since summer of last year, so
You're about
almost a year. Yeah.
It sounds good. I mean, why don't we take a look at it?
All right.
Cool.
So for anybody who's listening, whose faces we can't see, if you go to remesh.co, so that's like remesh.co, then that will put you on our site so you can like see it with your own eyes. If you would like to, we're gonna give a quick like click-through demonstration of kind of the key things, the key buttons and tools, and how it's used. So Aaron, do you want to?
Sure.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah.
So go ahead and do a screen share, and then we can see it on your screen.
All right. Okay. Is everybody? Let's see. Can you see currently my screen here?
Yes, you can see it.
Okay. So this is our landing page. If you don't have an account yet, you can go here and fill out a username, password, and email, and hit join, and it should log you in immediately right into a new account. And I'm going to just log in as myself here. So keep in mind that we were just born pretty much this week as far as our web platform goes. So we're in minimalist mode right now, but it is functional. So upon login, you should, as a new user, be part of your own mesh, which is an @ symbol with your username, and then you should be part of Earth as well. And if you click on Earth, you should see the different conversations that that Earth is currently partaking in. And so we have a couple of other UI tools. If you'd like to browse the list of available public meshes, then you can click on this little alias mask up here, and this should bring up a list of everything that you can join. These are things that we've been experimenting with and having our own conversations in the office and with close friends. So feel free to join any of these if you're interested in them. Today, though, we're going to be mostly focused on having you join the mesh called the GovLab. So if you click on the alias mask and in this list you see the GovLab, go on in there and click on the GovLab, and it should add to your list over here. And I guess we can give people a few minutes to do that. I don't really have any feedback loop method here except for maybe the Q&A. Okay. I see a lot of questions. Okay, cool. Great. So I guess we'll just let people join.
Yeah, we'll give you guys a second if you want to join into join the GovLab. If anybody has problems, we are staring at the questions screen. So if you have a problem, then just tell us. We'll answer it for you.
And that website again is remesh.co for those of you.
Yep. And it should be over here in the bar, in the questions. You'll see that someone posted the answer. That's also the link to it. So, So what we set up here today for you guys to play with is we decided our personal goals are really that we want to use this tool to really change how we as people govern ourselves, how we as people lead ourselves or represent ourselves in the world. And so we decided to set up a few mock conversations, if you will, as if you could interact with a country in the world. And so I'll let Aaron explain a little bit about how we're going to do this.
So we have a couple interesting demo conversations that we're going to be a part of. So you guys all out there participating will be part of a role play. And so you're going to be speaking with the fictitious nation of Zubrovska, who is currently in conflict of some kind. And maybe let's just say that a majority of people in the world don't see the conflict the way that Zubrovska's government sees it, but we're going to have a conversation with the people of Zubrovska. So GovLab is currently going to be interviewing the mesh of Zubrovska. So we also have another one with one of our favorites, Krill Blinton, and we're going to be speaking with him as a person of interest on the topic of world peace. So maybe we can talk to Krill about what's going on in Zubrovska, ways that he could potentially solve that. Basically, they're just open-ended conversations that we want you as the group to interact with a person of interest and another group of people, basically. And so
I guess we should show you a little bit the few things that matter and how it works is this left bar here is basically where you choose who you're speaking as. So for us, you want to speak as the GovLab. You see there's 3 conversations here, and if you click on a conversation, then it should load up that conversation.
Yes, it loaded up the conversation. It's fine.
All right. So if we go into a conversation, so Aaron, you want to load one of those up?
yes. I might have to refresh myself here. Let's see. Are you okay?
Yeah, mine's working good. Oh, maybe it's because you have your streaming video.
Maybe.
So we should tell you this is like the first test or one of the first tests of this platform. So things might be a little non-optimal, although things seem to be working on here. Yeah, dude, mine's working all right.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. It might just be my internet connection.
Does it seem to be working for you?
Yep, looking great.
Cool. So,
I mean, actually, I can just show you mine as well.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, and here's my screen share. And which conversation should I pick?
So if you want to go to the Earth Demos Democracy conversation.
Okay, Earth Demos Democracy.
So, so here you'll see the basically on the bottom below the conversation, this is where you enter in what you are thinking. So this is basically what you would want to say in the conversation, remembering that you're basically speaking on behalf of the GovLab.
If I'm a voiceless person, how does this tool help me? There we go. So now I've entered my choice, and I've got 2 choices.
Yep. So how it works now is that this panel that's on the right, you'll get 2 choices at a time. So in this case, it looks like we have 2 of the same. So if you want to click one of those, Basilio.
Sure. All right.
Hold on, let me enter in a different one. So you'll see that you can basically click through these choices. So you get 2 choices at a time, and you choose which of those 2 things that could be said are preferable to you. So if you hate both of them, then click on the one that you hate least. If you like both of them, click on the one that you like most. And so what is happening is that as we learn what you like or what you don't like, that we are building on a distribution of the opinions on each one of these thoughts. And so once we learn the opinions of all the thoughts, then we can figure out which thought best represents the group. And so you'll see as you start clicking through that every time you click through you get a new pair, and that the distributions of thoughts updates. So if you guys want to hop in this conversation, those of you who are listening, then we can start chatting here. Oh, and we should note, so you'll see in the top right corner of that box is a timer. And so this tells you how much time you have left before that response is going to be submitted, or before the algorithm finishes analyzing to understand what is the best thing to say on behalf of that group. So as the timer counts down and it gets closer and closer, we basically home the group, and when the timer clicks 0, our algorithm analyzes all of our data and arrives at the response which best represents it, and then it will show it as if the GovLab said that within the conversation, and then you're good to go. Oh, nice. Thank you.
It's growing. There's quite a lot of choices now.
Yes.
It's a very good question. What type of democracy would Remesh represent?
What type of democracy would Remesh represent? So that's a very good question. So I'll answer it in a few ways. So one way is to say that democracy itself is perhaps less well defined than we might like to wish. So I mean, democracy it originally means like the people represent themselves, or they govern themselves, or they represent on their behalf. But what we learned as we were working on this is that it's not really well defined what something means to say this is what represents the group. So in the case of our app here, you imagine we have these different thoughts, and we say, well, which thought best represents the group? Well, we could say the thought that the most people like. We could say the thought that the most people don't dislike. We could say the thought that has the highest degree of consensus that people like. And so I guess what Remesh would represent is a version of democracy that has a stronger mathematical and theoretical construct than we've seen before. Because up until now, democracy has been based on the idea of we'll call it a simple algorithm, right? When you want to know what the people prefer, you have a democratic vote, and the majority wins. And so how our algorithm works, it gives us the unique ability to not necessarily have a majority rule situation, but rather we can have a situation where the group can be represented in a more holistic way. So I guess that's a long answer to a simple question, but it's a good question.
The other person in the conversation can see, depending on their settings, all the different submissions. Is that right? Or is it only the top 5 or the top 2 or the top 10? What would it be?
Well, so on the platform as it sits right now, the person who you are talking to, in the end, they only see the final submission. And the idea behind this is that we want to have the final submission, think of it as in how we speak, right? When we have thoughts in our minds and we get to say something, we don't get to say all of our thoughts at one time. And this is probably actually a good thing, because if we could say all of our thoughts at one time, then this would mean that a person would have to try to respond to 10 thoughts, and that doesn't produce a very good conversation. And so what does produce a good conversation is if I say one thing, and what you can respond to is only one thing. And so the idea is that within the platform, we only display the very top thing, or the thing which best represents the group, so that the person they're talking to can respond to that. Now, having said that, because we have all the data, which is, we know the whole set of thoughts that belong to the group, and we know the whole distribution of those thoughts, well, then we can give that data or show that data to the person on the other side. So you imagine if Barack Obama is talking to the United States about healthcare, and he sees the final response which says, we just want cheaper healthcare for everybody, but without the healthcare being poor. That's one response, but that might be the culmination of thousands of other responses or thousands of other thoughts. And so to him, it would be valuable to see not only the final thought and respond to the final thought, but then going back to be able to look and see what are all the other thoughts that exist there.
Yes. I mean, another interesting question. It says here, how would it work exactly? Do you imagine that an organization's team will participate in a conversation in the same room? For example, if I'm looking to collect real-time feedback on a policy, I wonder how organizations can best participate with one voice.
Yeah, so I'll break those kind of into two answers. So the first question about in the same room. So this particular answer is that's what we've actually been doing ourselves. So we've been doing this on a rather small scale, and we do it in our office or within our offices. And we see that this actually works pretty good, because what it allows people to do is think collectively, so we can talk to each other and we can brainstorm or speak, but then we can, as we think collectively, we're coming up with all these thoughts, then we can put all the thoughts into Remesh, and in the end, we can then decide as a group what the thought that best represents is, and that's displayed. So organizationally, we see that that will probably be one of the important ways that it'll be used. Now, if you are let's see, let me read this again. If I'm looking to collect real-time feedback on a policy, so for an organization, there's a few ways that an organization would use this. They're trying to collect feedback on a policy. So the first is if they were trying to collect feedback on that policy from within their organization, and if this was the case, then they could collect everybody in a room and ask and put their organization into a mesh, and they could have a conversation about that particular policy. So let's say it was healthcare policy. Then they could get the collective thoughts of all of their healthcare, all the people on the healthcare board. They could see what they think. Now, if what the organization cared about wasn't just the collective thoughts of the people within their organization, but outside of their organization, well, then what they could do at that point is they could either find an existing mesh. So say they wanted to ask the USA, or they wanted to ask men, or they wanted to ask Democrats, then they could do that. Or they could create their own mesh, which was something specific to people who cared about healthcare policy, and then they could have a conversation with them. So the way that if you're looking to collect real-time feedback on policy, would be to start a conversation about that policy with the group whose feedback you wanted to get.
That reminds me of two questions that were actually asked earlier in the Google Hangout when it was first posted. The question is, will a politically polarized crowd of people choose an effective policy idea, or will they choose a watered-down option that is the least hated by both sides? And if so, what is the quality of the chosen policy options compared to the others? I wonder if there's ever been a study about that you've come across, perhaps.
So I can answer. There's a few parts to that question. So skipping to has there been a study? There's been some studies about what happens when you have groupthink and what happens when you have different ways of voting. So there's different voting systems, and they can make predictions about which voting system might come out with the best outcome. Now, what we are doing is, I guess, a little unique in that we basically have a certain function that decides how things are ranked, or how we decide what the top thing is. And the question is very the person knows what they're talking about, because this is what we've been putting a lot of effort into getting around or figuring out a solution to. And that is, well, it seems as if there's a few choices. You go with the thing that everybody agrees on, and you're perhaps left with something that's middle, yucky, and not good, right? If you drew a line between like Republican policy and Democrat policy, well, if you put a dot in the middle of that line, you wouldn't necessarily be at a better policy, right? So the converse of that is, well, what if you let the majority rule? That is to say, if there's 51% Democrats within a mesh, then would the Democratic response rise to the top? Would that mean that the majority would rule? And the answer is that what we're doing is actually neither of those things. So our scoring basically depends on you can imagine calling it the average group opinion of something. So this is like if 98% of people approved this thing, then it would be a 98. If 50% did, it would be a 50. But that's not the only number that we take into consideration. We also can basically penalize for responses or thoughts which the opinion is polarized, which is to say, if half really, really hate this response and half really, really like it, or if, say, some amount, let's say 80% really, really likes the response, but 20% really, really likes it, well, we could penalize that, and so that response would win. And so what we actually have is a way to tune between those extremes to try and find a better solution. And so we're working with Dr. Levine. Hello, Dr. Levine, if you're on here. At Columbia University to help us put together some studies to actually ask those questions in a proper academic form, and that is to ask the questions of what would be the optimal way to get it, and how do you even judge what optimal is. And so in Dr. Levine's case, he's been working with this study which basically puts a group of people together, and they have to go through this decision process. And so what they have to do is decide what the best way is to climb up this mountain, and along the way they have these different tasks, and they have to decide as a group what the best way to do it. And so what this does is it gives you a quantifiable result about how good the collective decision was. And so if the collective decision is good, then we say, yeah, we get to the top of the mountain. If the collective decision is not so good, we can say, well, how far did they get up the mountain, right? And so what we're going to be doing is taking our platform and our algorithm and going through those same sets of tests so that we can assess what is the best way, how do we enable the group to make the best decisions? How do we tune our algorithm so that the group makes the best decisions? And so our policy is that we want to stay kind of open and engaged with all our users, so the users can actually let us know what they think the best decision would be, or what they think it means for the group to speak collectively.
These are actually questions asked by Lucas Kyofi, if you're online right now. I think they're very interesting, and you've answered that quite well. One question he has is, would policymakers view the output of this tool as credible, given that people are only able to send tweet-sized responses? As you've probably noted, even if the quality of responses is high, it still has to be perceived as valuable by policymakers to be implemented.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And being that I myself am not a policy answer, I cannot give a first-hand answer, but I can give an answer as to what our interaction with people has been. And so basically, policymakers in general, the concern there is about numbers, right? It's about how many people are involved, or how many people have that opinion. And so you imagine if this thing is used and the result of it is that, let's say we have a discussion between the senator in Ohio, so say Senator Rob Portman, and the people of Ohio. And we want to know, well, does he care about what they say? Does it matter at all? And the answer is really, it depends how many people are participating, and it depends how well both the people trust the platform and how well he trusts the platform. And so basically, I could say it's in the eye of the beholder, but even more so than that, it's in the hands of the public, right? If the public says something to their senator and the senator doesn't agree, the senator disregards what they've said to him, and he votes in whatever the bill is against it, and the people do nothing, and they have no response. They say, well, we don't really care. He didn't listen to us, but whatever. Well, then that would make the senator tend to probably not care so much about what's said. However, if they say, hey, the people agree you shouldn't vote no on this particular bill, and he votes no anyway, and then the people express through other channels, including Remesh, hey, we're not happy about this, we told you what we think and you didn't listen to us. Well, if that's the case, and that leads the people to not vote for him, then there's very, very strong incentive that exists for that person to listen to what is said. So our hope is that we can basically create a feedback mechanism. So if say a person running for office, if they use our platform, then the result of using our platform is that they'll learn better what their constituency wants, what their constituency needs, and in learning those things, they'll be able to make better decisions, and people will want to tend to vote for them because he or she would be a person that represents them well. On the converse, if they choose to not interact with the people through Remesh, and one of the people running against them does, then this would give their competitor an advantage. And if no one did, then this would let people express or let people choose based on the standard way. And so the idea is that we're trying to empower people to speak together. In speaking together, to kind of transfer some power back to the people that has been transferred away from the people, because money now seems to have more power than do numbers. And so our idea is that we want to transfer the power back to numbers in a way that makes it, I guess, self-fulfilling, make the feedback loop complete.
Very compelling. I look forward to see how this app continues to develop. You know, I know it's very new. And we'll definitely be keeping in touch with you guys. Maybe we can even do a follow-up demo further down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And anybody who wants to ask us questions, feel free to shoot us an email. Or if you want to ask questions on the platform itself, I believe that Earth is always in a conversation with Remesh. So if you go into the Earth mesh, you'll see a conversation of Remesh and Hello World. And anything you ask in there, we will be responding to that always. So feel free to leave us both good comments, this is what we like, or what's even better for us is if you tell us what you don't like, what didn't seem to work, what you think could be done better. Those are all useful, and right now we're basically rebuilding and retesting and iterating kind of daily, and so what you say might actually make its way the next day into the app, and you could see it and use it. So we would highly appreciate that.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. You guys can continue your conversation with Andrew and Aaron at Team Remesh in Twitter. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
You can also always comment on #DemocracyDemos and tell us what you think. But thank you very much, Aaron and Andrew. Thank you for joining us. Our next session is scheduled for August 12. Do check our blog at thegovlab.org or at Twitter and for updates and details. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Bye.